Module 5, Safe Routes to School, a Community Road Safety Program. This module outlines the key elements of a Safe Routes to School program and presents it as one example of a community road safety project. It identifies the critical nature of clear problem identification as a first step to an effective project and outlines 2 alternative methods which can be employed. Mr. Taylor will start Module 5.
I'm going to talk to you about Safe Routes to School as an example of a community program. I'll do this in both Module 5 and Module 6 with 2 different components. The first thing we need to understand is what is Safe Routes to School. It's a program that targets school children's safety. The core of the program is a partnership. It's between the school, the teachers, the parents and the children, and sometimes local police, and often and usually local government. That's the partnership that's created with the program. The program usually runs through a management committee, a little project run by a management committee, and the best way is for the committee to be arranged or organised or managed by the school, because the program is of the greatest interest to the school. The first thing we need to understand is what is Safe Routes to School. It's a program that targets school children's safety. The core of the program is a partnership. It's between the school, the teachers, the parents and the children, and sometimes local police, and often and usually local government. That's the partnership that's created with the program. The program usually runs through a management committee, a little project run by a management committee, and the best way is for the committee to be arranged or organised or managed by the school, because the program is of the greatest interest to the school. Now, there are usually 6 major components that can be incorporated in a Safe Routes to School program. The first is in every Safe Routes program, and that's how to identify what are the key safety problems around the school for children, associated with where are the risks for them in crossing the road. That's the major thing. Children coming to the school, coming from the school. They have to cross roads. Which are the riskiest places for them to cross, and can we do something about that? There are engineering treatments usually identified in a Safe Routes to School to improve the crossing points and make it safer for kids. Sometimes it's a pedestrian crossing, sometimes you might have a supervisor, sometimes you might do some other physical works on the road. You might want to slow traffic down, so you put engineering treatments are part of a Safe Routes to School program. There is education in the classroom for the children, produced by the teachers, so the kids know what they need to do to be safe. That's part of Safe Routes to School as well. Then there is education for the parents on the risks their children face in going to school as pedestrians, but also the risks that parents create themselves when they bring the children to school in their vehicles and on their motorcycles. Schools can be very congested areas at the time the children are going to school, and the group that creates most of the risk is the parents. They hate it when I tell them that, because they say, we love our children. I say, you might, but you are creating the risk by what you are doing. So we need to educate the parents. There is often a little bit of police enforcement, usually not a lot, but often you might ask the police to say, look, there's a whole lot of people in the school who are parking in the wrong place and it's obscuring how the kids get out the gate and drivers can't see them. So the police might go there one day and remind people about where they should be parking. Or there might be, you might have found that there is some traffic that's speeding past the school. So the police might spend at the time when children are coming out, and they will stop some vehicles that are too fast. That sort of approach. And finally, the school administration is also a part of Safe Routes to School, because we've found that the school administration can change some of their policies that make things safer for school kids. And the policies I'm talking about are, some schools have staggered their end of school day for the little kids compared with the bigger ones. So the littlies get out a bit earlier and aren't subject to the same risks of the bigger kids. Or some schools have identified that the main gate is actually quite unsafe, but they've got another gate, and so they change where kids go out of the school in a gate, changing the management policy. Or some big schools often let teachers and children in high schools park their vehicles in the school. That needs to be thought of very carefully, because parked vehicles in the school are very, very close to a lot of pedestrians, and that can create a danger, and you might change your parking policy. So there are potential for school management, administration, to change their policies and increase the safety of children. So that's what Safe Routes to School is. Why do you have it? Well, children's safety is very important. We all believe we need to keep the safety of our children, more so than others probably. We know that schools have a duty of care to the children in their care, because they're adults out earning a living, and that's an important thing. We know that Safe Routes to School programs have been successful in improving children's safety. And finally, children, you've got to take special care in the road environment for children. They're little, people in cars often can't see them. Children are developing. Their eyesight, their vision is a little bit tunnely. They don't see out of the side of their eyes as well. They're very unpredictable. You never know what kids are going to do. They don't concentrate as much. Their attention span is limited. All of these factors mean that we need to make special care for children, and that's, again, one of the good reasons for Safe Routes to School. I think Safe Routes is a good first project, a good first community project if people are thinking about them. There's 2 steps to implementing a Safe Routes to School. The first step is you need to identify the risk of the road crossing areas around the school for all of the areas. Which are the riskiest, which are the safest? So there needs to be an audit, if you like, of all of the road crossing parts. That audit is undertaken by using this criteria. What's the speed zone of the roads? What's the road type? How many lanes usually? What are the traffic volumes? More traffic, greater the risk. What are the pedestrian volumes? Is it a part where a lot of kids go out of the gate? The more pedestrians, the more the risk to the kids. And finally, is there any assistance for them to cross the road? Is there a road crossing? Is there a zebra crossing? Is there a school supervisor? Are there traffic lights? Or is there none? All of those items are the criteria which you would use looking at each site around the crossing points around the school to measure their safety. Now, all that sounds hard, but you're very fortunate because we have what I call expert systems available to help you do that. And there are 4 of them. One is called Safe to School, Safe to Home, and that's produced by the Global Road Safety Program, GRSP. It's in draft form at the moment, and I'll be going through a little bit of detail with that, but it will be available for people to use as the first step in Safe Routes to School. There's another one called the Star Rating System. There's another one called School Pedestrian Risk, and the Star Rating System has a phone app which has been developed by Vic Roads in Victoria for use of schools in that state. All these expert systems simply help you address and identify which parts of the crossings around the school are the riskiest and which are the safest. Here's star rating systems. Firstly, the result of the system gives a rating. It's a number. And that number will be different for every crossing point. The higher the number, the riskier it is. The lower the number, the safer it is. Okay? Here are the things that are taken into account. Speed limit, road width, number of places where pedestrians have to conflict with vehicles crossing the road, traffic volume, if there is any crossing. These values will change depending upon the nature of the crossing. In this case, for this crossing, it's a speed limit of 50, it's a 50 speed zone, and that leads to a rating of 3.24. 3.24 is quite high. 50 k's is too high a speed to have outside of school. It should be lower. That's why the number is high. All of these numbers are combined together to give you this rating up the top here. That's how star rating systems, and you could apply the star rating to a crossing outside the front gate, the back gate, a crossing on the corner of the school, the first T intersection that's near the school, wherever children cross the road coming to school. Here's another one. This is called Pedestrian School Risk. This is produced by ARRB. This is hard to see, and you don't need the detail. But here, the speed is identified there. This is what's the exposure to risk, which is the number of vehicles and the number of pedestrian volumes, and you get a different number for each. And then there's the likelihood of a crash occurring with a number of the criteria. What's the sight distance is included in this one? Is there any parking that confuses people? And this one up here is how many lanes to cross. So all of that criteria is similar, and the end result here is again a number. And for this crossing, a little primary school on a quiet road, the answer is 2.28. And so each answer can be compared with the other. That's a slide of the Safe to School, Safe to Home one in draft, which is available or will be available from the Global Road Safety Program. Now, I want to try and show you how this works. Here's an example of the program in operation. I've got the school name, Manila Elementary. It's in a certain street called Knowledge Street. It has an intersecting road called Ignore Avenue here, and that's the name of the town where it is. Now, the first thing is, what's the severity of this location? And we've got the approach speed or the speed limit as identified as 50, and that gives a relative risk of 1.22. And there's also a measure of congestion in this. Now, it's a very simple system to operate. You can do it for every crossing where children are, and you get a different measure. So if you've got 5 crossings, you'll get a measure for each crossing, and you can list them from the safest to the unsafest. And so that's the first step of Safe Routes to School done. You have identified which are the safest parts for the children and which are the unsafest, and you can then start working on the unsafest crossing point. Okay? So step 1 is just assessing around the school what is safest, what is unsafest, and you use these expert systems to help you do that. This will be available from GRSP. Okay, they're talking that this will be available from the Global Road Safety Project in September or October in final format. It's in draft now. Step 2. What's the second step to implementing Safe Routes to School? The second step is that we need to give a more detailed assessment of the riskiest site in the list that we've already got. So we take them site by site for road crossing. You do a detailed investigation, and that involves things like observing driver behaviour, observing the behaviour of the pedestrians and putting that down into a template and increasing the information about that particular site. You do that by getting somebody, could be a staff member at the school, could be senior children, as long as they're possibly trained, it could be somebody from local government. But they would make a risk assessment of the site using a template. This is the risk assessment template. Now, if I show you the features of this. It tells you the crossing, the street, is there a crossing type, what's the speed zone, what's the hourly pedestrians, and what's the hourly traffic. All that information is taken from the first analysis that you did. It's taken from the expert system. This thing here called Met Warrant, that's something that applies in road authorities and transport departments for whether there is enough traffic for a special crossing to be put in place. It either meets the warrants or it doesn't meet the warrant. Then you have a look at behaviours. What's the parking behaviour? Has anybody been double parking? Have they parked in a no stopping zone? Have they overstayed the parking? Are they obscuring the children's view or the driver's view of the children? All those are parking problems. You would have a look at the signage at the site. Is it well maintained? Is there too much clutter? Is the signing insufficient? Do drivers not know what the speed zone is? Is foliage covering the sign so people can't see? Then you look at the driver behaviours. Are there people speeding? Are there people undertaking inappropriate speed? Inappropriate speed might be below the speed limit, but it might be on a very wet road where you should slow down more. So you make measures of that. U-turns, not stopping at the stop line. Are people being distracted, talking on the phone? Are parents dropping off their children to school in danger? And are there any cars that fail to stop at the crossing? And finally, you look at the pedestrian behaviours. These will usually be the behaviours of the children. Do they not wait for the supervisor? Do some kids not cross at the crossing? Very dangerous if the kids aren't crossing at the crossing. Do they cross from between parked cars? That's very dangerous behaviour because children are lower than the bonnets of cars, particularly SUV vehicles, and they can't be seen. And they pop out and they get hit. Are there any kids coming to school late after the supervisor's gone from the crossing, so they have to cross on their own? These are information that you would include in your template, and that gives you information that tells you what's going on at the site that you can treat. Now let's have a look at what this site is. I haven't given you the numbers here, but some are things in red and some are yellow. The red ones I say are very, very dangerous. The yellow ones are just very dangerous. And they're the behaviours and the issues that we would want to address in our program. What are they? Some speeding, some inattention, some parents doing bad things, dropping off their kids or failing to stop, a couple of kids not crossing, and a number of kids crossing between parked cars. So there's some children's behavioural issues, parents' behaviour, driver behavioural issues, and a little bit of bad parking, which might not help. Okay? That's what's happening at this site. When you analyse that, this is what you get. It's a relatively safe site. It's got a school crossing supervisor with a flag, so that reduces the risk, but it's a busy street and it's a 50k zone. Where little kids are, 50 k's is too fast for most of the traffic. So that increases the risk. The signage is okay, there's no problems with that. And the children's behaviour is generally okay with a couple of exceptions of uncrossed behaviour. But the driver behaviour is a problem. There's speeding, there's inappropriate speeding, there's bad dropping off, and there's people yabbering on the telephone when they should be attending to what they're doing. What do we do to fix this site? This is what Safe Routes to School is all about. What do we do? Here's what we do. Firstly, whoever is the authority, you say, we want a 40k zone surrounding that crossing. We've got to slow down the traffic, and one of the ways might be a 40k zone. How else might we slow the traffic? We might arrange for police to do a little bit of random enforcement of speeding and also parking at the same time. They're both problems. They probably won't have to do very much. If police are there for just a couple of days, people will get the message. We might want to do some road treatments, perhaps a raised platform at the school crossing so that drivers have to go over a bump and that slows them down. Or we might have some curb extensions so that we narrow the roads and therefore the width that the children have to cross is limited. So you can do some treatments. And we might have to have some education for parents about the dangers of dropping off and how to drop off safely, and also the dangers of double parking. That's not the whole program, that's just the start. Here's some other things we can do. Children might be educated in school about the safe crossing behaviour. We might ask the school crossing supervisor to be a part of the teaching program and talk to the kids waiting at the curb saying, don't you cross away from the crossing because it's unsafe. We could take traffic speed measures after the plan's implemented to see if we've actually slowed the traffic down. We could get senior students to observe and log the children's crossing behaviour to see if we've improved their logging their behaviour with the education program. And they could also log the parents' driving behaviour at the same time. I'm sure the senior elementary students would love to log the parents' behaviour on a log. And we can publish those outcomes if there's been positive changes for the school community. There's a community road safety program targeting a specific issue, a little bit of examination of the area. Once you've got that, the program falls out. And it's a straightforward program to implement and you can get good outcomes. That's Safe Routes to School in a nutshell.